Hello, I'm Benjamin Hall, a senior lecturer at Leeds Beckett University in the School of Art. This paper presents 3 practical workshops from a module on BA Honours Graphic Arts and Design, or graphics for short, at Leeds Beckett University. Graphics is a course that's unique in its use of experiential teaching methods, diversity of creative practices, and the fostering of a non-hierarchical collaborative learning environment. In the second year of the degree is the module GAD 5.2 Process-Led Studio Practice, or Process Brief, which on the surface appears to be the ubiquitous art school graphic processes unit, where students explore a breadth of processes in order to expand their creative practice. The focus on the module is experimental and presents students with opportunities to discover new approaches to graphic arts and design. Process Brief isn't so much about practical processes as much as developing attitudes as to material, so what this is, and more importantly, what this could be. An experimental module that is concerned with newness and discovery runs the risk of being incompatible with the university convention of learning outcomes. As such, during its revalidation, one of Process Brief's objectives was written specifically to give license to unorthodox interpretation of an art school standard. So this is the 4th learning outcome from the module, which is you will be able to show a developing ability to embrace ambiguity, uncertainty, and unfamiliarity in relation to your individual creative practice, and to harness this in the production of meaning. The module requires that students pursue a process-led approach for the duration of the unit, as opposed to being concept-led or design-led, where an idea or a problem to solve can often dictate a predictable and arrived at too soon end product. As such, Process Brief is not about the outcome, but the activity, so the doing and the making. The submission requirements for the module is a 1-minute film, which serves as evidence of having adopted a process-led approach. We find that a time-based submission is better for documenting activity than a finished physical outcome, as it's able to convey the making as well as what was made. So the 3 workshops from Process Brief that I'm going to be talking about are magnet fishing, cave drawing, and the workshop that must not be named, each of them pictured here. Each workshop seeks to loosen the expectation and convention of education, in which learning can be perceived as a downwardly linear process of guaranteed outcomes. On graphics, we hold the belief that teaching should be mutual, collaborative, and experiential. In this way, the approaches detailed in these case studies are not just limited to art school. These can be applied across all disciplines, creative, educational, or not. On the very first day of the module, we go magnet fishing, an activity which involves taking a collection of high-strength retrieval magnets to the Leeds-Liverpool Canal. The preparation for this workshop is minimal, which mainly involves filling a bag for life with magnets and completing a risk assessment form. The intention of the session is for us to discover submerged magnetic material, which the students can then turn into new work via a series of creative processes. Previous developments from the session have included assemblage, drawing, photography, sculpture, sound, animation, and soft furnishings. Obviously, these are the physical, measurable outcomes of an activity which is in the main experiential and social. The context of magnet fishing is important in 2 ways. Firstly, the session involves taking students off campus, which frees us from the convention of learning associated with it. Graphics exists in an art school setting, but an expectation still exists that the teaching is linear, delivered by tutors and received often passively by students. Away from these associations, the workshops attract high numbers as there is an assumption that magnet fishing is not going to be work and it will be fun. The students are free to join in with the activity or not. It's entirely up to them. They can take part, they can sit and watch, or they can do something entirely different, which includes leaving the session. The context of the canal is also key. The water's murky and we're unable to see what we might be fishing for, so it creates natural conditions of uncertainty. We have no control over what we might find, and we're happy to surrender to this unknowing. There isn't a set way to fish with a magnet, and as such the workshop does not offer any instruction. The magnets are distributed and their use has to be worked out via a process of experimentation. As tutors, we take part in the activity too, with some of us having been magnet fishing before and others to whom the activity is completely new, sharing this experience for the first time with the students. This normalises the not knowing. We don't know what to do, but we'll try something and see what happens. The session is an opportunity for self-instruction where the students and staff instruct themselves how to fish. When children don't know what to do with something, they play with it to work it out. And in the same way, we author our own methods for magnet fishing by playing with the tools and materials that we've been given. What's always surprising about magnet fishing is the way in which the participants become engaged in the activity. Often the session's timetabled during October, and as such the weather's cold and wet. In spite of this, participants are still eager to fish in torrential conditions, and it can be difficult to drag them away. On one occasion, a student of the group discovered a large object and was having trouble bringing it to the surface. He asked another participant for help, and with 2 magnets they were able to see that the difficult object was in fact a rather modern bin. Despite knowing that this wasn't anything of value, he persuaded 2 others to help, training a total of 4 magnets on the bin to see if they could haul it out. After half an hour of bringing this to the surface and then seeing it sink back down, the bin was eventually retrieved. By this point, all the participants were soaked from the rain, but ecstatic with their achievement and the activity. The student who originally discovered the bin insisted on carrying it back through town to university. The combination of not knowing and self-instruction mirrors the conditions required for discovery learning. In Child's Play for New Scientists, Jerome Brumer details a study in which 3 groups of children who were required to perform a task of combining tools in order to retrieve a prize from a box. Each group was given different forms of training, with one being simply allowed to play with the materials. The untrained group performed as well as those that had been instructed, with an additional important observation. What was particularly striking was their capacity to resist frustration and giving up. From having staged magnet fishing on a number of occasions now, it's become clear that the material that we gather at the canal is not important. It's a red herring. It's not what we discover, but what we might discover. The workshop offers an opportunity for participants to experience an ongoing state of possibility, encouraging faith and belief in a process even if they come away with nothing. Cave drawing involves setting up a large-scale opportunity for painting within the studio. The intention of the session is to just draw without the suggestion or distraction of there being a right or wrong way to do this. We cover tables with rolls of paper and put out mark-making materials such as inks, brushes, sponges and sticks. These tools are purposely uncontrollable and unconventional in order to encourage experimentation and mistake making. From schooling, students are still anxious about getting things wrong, and being asked to do this in public can be quite a daunting prospect. There is an assumption that their performance will be judged both by their peers and by their tutors, and this can be a hindrance to an experimental module. To remedy this, the tutors draw too. In taking part, we're all exposing ourselves to these same judgments, and this vulnerability leads to trust. Of this approach, Herbert Reed writes that the teacher must be no less active than the pupil, and by joining in, the aim is for the workshop to become as near to a non-hierarchical collaboration as possible. One aspect of Process Brief that we are keen to establish is the concept of following one's instincts and letting the material lead the way. To encourage this in cave drawing, we listen to the audio of I Contain Multitudes by Ed Yong, a lecture which describes the microbes that live within our gut, that often guide us and make decisions on our behalf without our conscience knowing. The dialogue is scientific and literal and serves to divert our consciousness away from the drawing. Whilst the mind is distracted, this enables the mark making to become an embodied act where the body chooses what to paint. This doesn't happen immediately. The session begins with caution and often mistrust, but knowing that we are all drawing together eases this apprehension and allows the ink to flow freely. As we inevitably run out of space on the paper, the collaborative nature of the workshop becomes acutely apparent. Marks begin to overlap and spill over into other people's territories, and we rotate positions around the tables to actively encourage trespass. Fellow tutor Joe Hassel has a saying, "It's only paper," which is a stark reality that enables us to loosen up and be more open to the experimental nature of the session. Socially, this enables the crossing of communities or cliques that can develop within the undergraduate cohort, and creatively, this teaches us to be less precious about material and allows for accidental hybrids, which can then be developed via new processes. The workshop that must not be named is a workshop which involves absolutely no preparation other than a room booking, a date, a time and a place. The session takes its title from a Harry Potter themed shop in York, which is itself a play on He Who Must Not Be Named from the book by J.K. Rowling. To talk or even think about the workshop before it takes place would go against its strict no planning rule. When we imagine what might happen, we create an expectation, and this can be problematic in education. Students expect to learn in a set way, which is often the school convention where the teacher leads the class and the pupils follow their instruction. As educators, we have expectations of learning too, and prepare for a multitude of scenarios in order to fulfill externally applied requirements. If a workshop or lesson doesn't match this prediction, then it's written off as a failure. But every situation, even those that don't go right, are an opportunity for learning. The well-worn and potentially paraphrased adage, fail to plan, plan to fail, applies appropriately here, as it is these unexpected mistakes that will lead us to newness and discovery. The more that we plan, the more likely we are to arrive at the same predefined outcomes, and so removing permission for planning will unlock invention. The workshop that must not be named is about spontaneity and creating something from nothing, but we never truly come to any situation with nothing. We arrive with experiences, skills and strategies that we instinctively apply to new scenarios. The workshop also takes place in an institution rich in resources, both material and technical, which we can call upon too. At the start, we declare that the session has no plan, and as such we don't know what will happen. We don't give the students instruction in what to do, because their guess is as good as ours. There is the inevitable moment of doubt at the start when no one knows what to do. But work starts to take place. Students locate materials with which to experiment. Staff find projectors and stick things to the wall. Creative journeys begin, develop and end up where we didn't expect it to. Some participants take pictures of the overlaps between theirs and somebody else's work, highlighting the collaborative hybrids that can take place. As the activity unfolds, both the students and staff have democratically assumed responsibility for the learning that takes place. In a module that asks students to embrace uncertainty, it's only fair that as tutors we place ourselves in unfamiliar situations too. But just joining in with the activity isn't enough. We're still in control of the session. This discomfort has to be meaningful, so in removing the possibility to plan a workshop exposes us to the same discomfort as the students. This signals to the collaborative community that we trust that what we are doing will lead us somewhere interesting. The key to these workshops and process brief is stepping back. As tutors, we often assume the bulk of the responsibility for learning, which can perpetuate a passive learning model. In each session detailed here, we step back, but not away. We step back and join the community, taking part in the activity too. In this way, the responsibility for learning and teaching is shared. In fact, there comes a point in the module where the students forget that they are learning, and we as tutors forget that we are teaching. In loosening the conventional hierarchies of education, we enable a more trusting environment. The students need to trust that despite the experimental nature of the module, they're not being tricked. If we include ourselves in the collaboration and subject ourselves to the same unfamiliar situations, then this reinforces our belief in what we are doing. Each workshop features the same moment of doubt. In magnet fishing, it happens before we instruct ourselves. In cave drawing, it happens before someone breaks the ice, applying the first mark on the canvas. And in the workshop that must not be named, this happens when we realise that doing something is better than doing nothing. As educators, it's incredibly important that we hold our nerve during this uncomfortable phase and remember that often the best thing that we can do to facilitate active and autonomous learning is nothing. If we trust ourselves and trust the process, things will work out all right. I would like to conclude with some advice from a report by the Michigan Department of Public Instruction from 1862, which sums up this theory. It says, "Leave the pupils mainly to their own spontaneous self-activities. The teacher may awaken and give direction to their curiosity by an occasional adroit question, but he should chiefly rely upon the action of his pupils' own powers for the discovery of new facts. As a general rule, nothing should be told to pupils which they can discover for themselves." Thank you.